So I'm fortunate enough to be sitting here in the living room of Rob and Nancy Prince, a couple people that I've known for quite a while and have a lot of respect for. And why don't you guys introduce yourselves? Um, introduce yourselves individually first. Who are you? Tell us a little bit. Where have you worked? Who, just tell us who you are.
Whoa, that's a hard one. You better go first.
All right, my name is Rob Prince. I'm a retired teacher. I'm born in New York and raised in New York City, and went into the Peace Corps after college in North Africa. Wound up in Colorado, got off a bus from Chicago, looked around and said, this ain't Brooklyn. And within a short period of time, got into a graduate program, got a job, and met Nancy. And that was 53 years ago. And what else, we talk about, we can fill in the blanks there later. But we're together, we're married, how many years? 46? 46, it pains her to think of it. And know each other 53 years. And I'm retired. I retired from teaching in 2015. I was in the middle of a lecture at the University of Denver and forgot what I was talking about, literally. Had to ask the class. They told me. I finished the lecture and I went over to the dean and said, I'm retiring. Time has come. So I'm retired teacher now. So
From University of Denver?
yeah, I taught 2.5 years in North Africa at the University of Tunis. Here I taught at first at Red Rocks Community College, then at Metro, and then in 1993, I think, I'm not two or three, I got hired on at the University of Denver's Corbell School of International Studies, and I stayed there until I retired in 2015. And now I'm just Rob. Feels
Thanks,
much
just
better.
Rob. Thanks. How about you, Nancy?
I'm not used to giving a biography, an autobiography. So I grew up in Colorado. I have 3 siblings and parents. We lived many places because my dad was kind of a never satisfied type. But the place that I grew up that I especially liked and remember was a small farm outside of Lyons, Colorado. That was a neat place to be. And then when I was 17, my family went to Germany because my dad had the itch to go live in a foreign country, and he dragged us with him. I was happy to be dragged, but some of the family was not so happy to be dragged. And learned German, came back here, and went straight to CU. That's where I met Robert. And then I went to nursing school at some point and worked initially doing obstetrics and gynecology and labor and delivery, newborn nursery. It was work that I really liked, but as you probably know, healthcare is very, litigious. And so if someone didn't get a perfect baby, by God, someone was going to pay. And the stress was a lot, so I did not want to. Well, we had the excuse that we left for Finland for 5 years where Robert had a job. And when I came back, I just didn't want to go back to such high stress healthcare. So I started working in nursing homes, which I also liked, but which also has become very litigious. Anyway, I worked at a private nursing home and got fired because I didn't understand at the time, but because somebody wanted a different associate director of nurses, and people fire other people for absolutely terrible reasons, but anyway. And then I ended up working at Colorado State Veterans Community Living Center, which is the kind of flagship facility for veterans and other people right in Aurora. That was good work, although there was some terrible things work-wise that happened there. The state is not as civilized a place to work for as one might think, although it depends. It really depends on who your boss is and who the head of the department is, but it's pretty unreliable. As I was working with the union there, that seemed to be what the excitement was about, was the state was trying to break the union, or at least the Department of Human Services was trying to break the union. And now I'm retired. So that's a lot of water under the bridge.
Wow. That's a really good introduction for somebody who's not used to giving an introduction. So you guys have been married 47 years.
47?
Well, it was 1975, and I started to lose track, but I think it's close. I
think it's 47.
Because
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a good long time. A lot of life has happened in those times. What's happened in your marriage in 47 years? What did you guys go through?
I don't know. In the early years, there was a lot of anti-Vietnam War activity and marches and organizing, and Robert was always busy doing his political activities. That did sometimes make for some tension, especially after there were kids.
Agreed.
What I remember is that I always had to work, nursing shifts are not great time. When you have to be at work at 6 in the morning, it's kind of hard to find babysitters. And
Yeah.
so you would end up traveling, and I would have to be trying to find someone to take care of kids at terrible hours. But somehow it worked. Somehow it worked out. I think Ruth was pretty helpful. Our friend Ruth was willing to take kids at odd hours or come here sometimes. He was gone a lot initially.
Yeah.
The first years traveling around mostly the country, but occasionally outside of the country. And then later, 1986, maybe it must have been the end of 85, somebody called you from the U.S. Peace Council and asked if you'd be interested in going to Finland to work at the World Peace Council. And then you came and told me, and we thought about it for what?
2 seconds.
15 seconds?
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know, and we were
Between
just
2 and
ready
15
for a
seconds.
change. We were ready to get out of this country, and it was a
Right.
very wonderful opportunity that we went and spent time there with our kids.
Yeah, that was special.
Yeah.
Hard, but special. I would just, to try to put it metaphorically and diplomatically, because you asked about, marriage. Nancy's roots are really from eastern Nebraska, and mine are from Brooklyn. All right, and her family, are they mostly Methodists? I don't
The
know.
ones who are still back
I mean,
there?
that's in terms of the background, not.
Oh, the background. Yeah.
Yeah,
Methodist.
yeah, and mine is Orthodox and conservative Jewish. So eastern Nebraska meets Brooklyn, and the interesting thing about it, to this day, we look at whatever human situations, what's going on in nature, society. It seems to me with really different eyes. So that can be conflictual, I suppose, and it, at times it certainly was. But the other thing about it is, if you kind of get used to it, it's really interesting. it gets you out of your own little way of your own cocoon, if you like. Uh, um, and that's something that I wish everybody in their relationships, marriage or otherwise, can have, and that I appreciate. But of course, I didn't understand that when you get married, you don't just marry a person. You marry a goddamn network, on both sides, right? That's not what I thought marriage was about, but that's what it's about.
Yeah, there was some tension around.
Yeah. So whether it was in my family, you're marrying a shiksa, a non-Jewish girl, or in our family, I'm not going to even begin to say, but I think that the first, by the way, I'll go to the end of it. We get on very well with my in-laws. I think we're as close as, we're very close. But having said that, it wasn't that way in the beginning. So, it's a whole process, right? And I can only tell you how fortunate I feel, both about the relationship and being here and the stuff that we've shared over the years. So, of course, look, you're being honest. Any human relationship, it's got tensions,
Well, of course. I mean,
and with two personalities like ours, they're there. Someone asked me, I have never been asked this question. People have not asked me, about relationship advice. Maybe they asked me about other things, but not that. And I was asked about it, do you have any advice? And it was young people who asked me. I didn't know what to say. And the only thing I could think of was, you're gonna fight fair. That's it, all right? Anyhow.
Wow. So I know one thing that happened along these 47 years, you guys had two beautiful daughters, right? Who
Yep.
have met that wonderful human beings. What did they teach you? I believe that kids teach us more than that we teach them. I mean, we're doing the raising, but I'm not sure that it's not the other way around. What did your kids teach you?
well, I'm sure they did teach us things, but I don't think I was either the very most astute parent either. Especially now that we have a grandchild and I see how other people raise kids. Because the times were different then, you spent time with the kids, but you also sent them outside to play while you did the housework or went to work. I didn't spend all my time with the kids, making sure they had the most classes and the most out-of-school activities.
And that they start kids soccer at the age of 2 or whatever.
We didn't. Maybe some people did that then, but
we didn't. No.
So I guess we could have given them a lot more, but we did the best we could, which doesn't give very many
Right,
details.
but-
What did they teach us? I don't know. It seeps in slowly as you go along.
I think for me, I've thought about it a lot, and I can't tell you what it means to have had children. That's all. I think it would have been a much narrower person. Certainly politically, I'm convinced of that, but also in other ways. So, all I can't tell you what they taught me, other than I can tell you that we were really close with them. My feeling is I can't get enough of seeing them, and it's the same. I'd like to believe it anyhow. They're two really incredible young women. And I don't know what I did. I really, I think I'm really glad that we traveled together to you know, when you go with your partner, wife or whatever, to a foreign country where they speak a different language, or in Finland's case where it's, you know, close to the North Pole and all that, and with your kids, it's a real challenge for the relationships. And I saw this in Peace Corps too, by the way, in Tunisia. It brought people together, and in some cases, I mean, there were couples there a couple months, and bam, that was it. They got divorced. So I think Finland. I mention it because as a family experience, I think it just really brought us together. Pretty, you know, it was always pretty good with the kids, but it was stronger. And the problems came, as often happens, for anybody who lives in a foreign country 4 or 5 years, when you come back here. And that was for them. And we're just finding it out now, 30 years later. It was hard
They didn't
for
realize
them.
how traumatic
We didn't,
it
or
was for
it was
them
traumatic,
to
yes.
come back. They said
Yes.
they didn't understand what was happening for years.
Yeah, yeah,
Because they had been
yeah.
5 years away from being young, and we felt badly because
Yeah.
we didn't understand that.
We
at
didn't
all.
understand it till years later, and how much, you know, one daughter, Molly, a couple of years ago, she told me she cried every night for a year coming back, okay? And Abby said more or less the same thing. So I don't know, you know, I can only tell you they got through it pretty well. You know, part of it was, you know, you see in TV and on the news how the quality of Finnish schools, and our girls were in Finnish schools, and I can't explain it all, but I want to tell you the elementary education that they got in Finland, when they came back here, they were like way ahead.
Like 2 grades.
You know,
ahead.
2 grades at least ahead of, and so there was that part of it, and then there was also, well, how do you fit in here? And that was not,
You mean coming back here?
yeah, coming back here. Yeah, once we're back here. So there are those things. You know, I don't think, I don't know how to answer that in terms of, you know, it's an interesting question.
It is an interesting question.
And I'm sure that there's a lot to it.
And of course, they open up your.
Yes.
When they have interests, there were different. You learn that you can't determine what your kids do or what their interests are. And I think in the beginning, you know, as young parents, you don't really realize that. But their interests expand, and then that expands your own
That's right,
understanding.
yes.
Like when Abby began to ice skate better than I could ice skate, I just thought that was so wonderful to have an offspring who could do, and you know, she was still a kid, who could do something better than I. I remember that feeling. And of course Molly
Yeah.
they're both, you know, great women with
Yeah.
a lot of good people skills, and they're really good to their parents too.
Yeah.
Which they're always sympathetic, you know, even when we weren't the best parents. They don't hold it against us now, it doesn't seem.
Well, it doesn't seem right. You hope not, but what do you know? There was something I wanted to add there. I can't remember what it was. Something, whatever. It slipped my mind. Something about all that. Okay, it's gone.
Well, Abby is a mental health therapist, and I, you know, really admire that. She works with people who've gone through, you know, icky trauma, stuff that nobody wants to have to go through. And I always kind of was interested in psychology, but I, you know, went into nursing, and so I always thought that was neat. And then Molly is just a terrific teacher. And
Outstanding.
And that's I mean, it's hard to define that because teacher's a pretty generic term, and a lot of people don't think much of teachers. In fact, in this country, there's that saying, them that can do and them that can't teach. But that's kind of a tacky saying, because a really, really good teacher is
A rare thing. And
well, and is
yeah.
just a rare a rare bird and influences people's lives. And I know part of the reason she became a teacher was, of course, because he was a teacher. But in Finland, she had a wonderful, wonderful teacher the very first year who spent her own private time teaching Molly Finnish and helping her, culturally with the country. And I know that influenced her to become a very good teacher. So she's very in tune with the kids, and what may be difficult for them, or especially kids who are coming from a different culture. Oh, this isn't supposed to be about the kids, but anyway.
No, but the other thing I'd say about them, and so we have a mutual friend, I won't mention names, but you and I, who was always talking about Molly, the Romero troupe, and the way he would put it is, your daughter, your daughter, your daughter. And finally I said to him, look, man, of course she's my daughter, but she is her own person. And if you think you're going to learn about her through me, you're mistaken. And that's how they both are. They're their own people. There's a folk singer, of course now I'm spacing it out, Tom Paxton. Okay. And he has got a wonderful song about his two daughters and how they've enriched his life and how different they are. And I can listen to that song a lot because to me, it's Sabby and Molly.
So you guys have always been like concerned and active outside of yourselves. Not your. What I'm trying to say is, you get yourselves involved in things that don't really necessarily directly concern you. You're if you know what I mean. And why do you do that? Why do you take up what looks to be other people's causes?
I'm going to let you start because I have to take a side trip.
Why? Ernie, you do come up with the wittiest questions. And I just know ever since I was young, I wanted to, it was kind of generic, but I wanted to help and I wanted things to be better for people, and didn't really know what that meant. I suppose at one time I thought of things like being a doctor, and my family would have really liked me to be a doctor, but I really wasn't a good personality for being a doctor, so didn't do that. But other kinds of things, like the whole, well, I mentioned already the activity around the Vietnam War, because that was certainly a huge one. And also that when Robert and I met, we met on a project called Project Rulison. Maybe he's spoken about it. It was in 1969, right after we got back from Germany, and we were both at CU, both Robert and I. And there was, was it 69? Yeah. A plan to detonate underground nuclear bombs in the mountains near Rifle. And it was supposed to the idea was to release natural gas, and then the gas would be sold to Los Angeles or somewhere. But it seemed like a stupid idea, and people who weren't even scientists or were just lay people said, but the gas is going to be radioactive, so what can you really do with radioactive gas? And in addition to that, it was going to tear up the mountains, which really upset me. When you're young, you have really strong, sort of black and white ideas of the world sometimes, and I just thought that was a horrible idea to be detonating bombs in the mountains. So anyway, we were part of a group, oh dear, this is Teddy's. We were part of a group that went and sat on the bomb site thinking that they wouldn't detonate the bombs if the people were sitting there. And for a while they didn't, and it was put off, and this went on for a few weeks. And eventually we had friends who went up there and it was detonated. The bomb was detonated while they were
Rulerson.
up there, and it lifted them off the ground. They said they were laying on the ground anyway, and it didn't actually hurt them, but I don't know, just kind of drawn to some of those kinds of things that seemed really wrong.
Yeah.
Let him talk, because he's done much more of such things. I was just giving Arnie examples.
Oh, of why we got involved in things?
Well, just what kind of things you do aside from, I don't know, aside from your everyday.
Well, what I'm interested in, why do you do it, Rob? Why do you do it?
Oh, let me put some wood on the fire. I'll think about it. I mean, it's just second nature now. Just do it because it's the right thing to do. But anyhow, let me get that in there. That'll keep us nice and warm. Well, I'll make 2 points. One is building on Nancy's talk about Rulerson, Project Rulerson. So did you explain Project Rulerson, what it was? Really, it's simply fracking with nuclear weapons. That's exactly what it is. Craziest thing I've ever heard of. When we went up to the site where we were protesting with the people to try to stop the blast, which we were not successful in doing, but still, what I remember is I see this young woman, Nancy, sitting on a rock, looking contemplative. And not too many other people there look contemplative. I mean, they were fine, but it was just interesting. So I went up to her, as I recall, and said, "You look so contemplative. What are you thinking about?" Thinking, "I'm angry. These are my mountains. They're destroying my mountains." And I just responded back and said, "I'm from Brooklyn. They're not my mountains, but this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of." Okay, that's how I remember we met. Okay.
Oh, but we weren't actually talking about how we met. We were talking about.
That's okay.
But the thing about these were your mountains, you already had this sense of the environment, of public space, that this belongs to everybody, and all I thought was the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. So there's that. Look, in my case, there's really two things that led to my politicization. Certainly one of them is growing up Jewish. Okay, there's no question about it. And it's not that my immediate relatives were caught up in World War II and the horrors of World War II. But my mom's cousins, my mom and dad's cousins, that whole world that they left. And in my case, it was Eastern Poland, Western Belarus, and Lithuania. That's where they all came from. And so that, that was I'm born in 1944. That is a overwhelming presence in my youth. All right, i.e., we don't let it happen again. What makes me a little bit different than, I guess, what we could call mainstream Zionist Jews is when I think about the Holocaust, and I do think about it every day. I still read about it almost every day. You see there's 3 volumes there, the complete works of Primo Levi. Primo Levi, an Italian Jew who was in Auschwitz. Fantastic, but very painful reading. But, okay, my point here, though, is, what I concluded from that is Jews were not alone in the horrors that befell the Jews. We were like 4 million Poles. The number of Soviets that died. I keep hearing higher and higher figures. I mean, figures that blow the mind. I mean, what does it mean how can you conceive of 27 million people? Not 6 million, but 27 or 6 million. And I'm reading these little incidents where, in 2 days they killed 15,000. All right? And so my whole thing is that for that not to happen again, Jews have to make alliances with other oppressed people. All right? What Zionism does, and I'm talking about this because this is a big part of me, What Zionism says, we're unique, it just happened to us. Well, of course what happened to Jews is horrible. There's not even a word for it. But it didn't just happen to us. And even, so for me it's like, we all have to be in this together. Why are you separating us out? As if what was so horrible for us wasn't horrible so it's only 4 million Poles who died? So that has been a absolute pillar, if you want, from the beginning to the end. The second thing, so I mentioned I went into Peace Corps. I was in North Africa. And look, patriotism has changed what it means. So to be a young American patriot in 1966 was to be against the war. Okay? And as one of our Finnish friends said, patriotism in the 60s? How many people could you sleep with? That was what people said. Patriotism has changed. But whatever. I always loved that definition, but that's, of course, needless to say, a little silly. But that aside, every single male in the Peace Corps group that I was a part of was, like myself, a draft dodger. Every single one of us. All right? And I mean, we just start talking to each other, blah, 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 It was all the same. We didn't want to go to that war. We weren't particularly political. All right? We just didn't want to go to the war. And we didn't have the courage to go to prison the way some dear friends of mine, Dick Gould, Ernesto Vigil, that's what they did. But anyhow, I wound up in Tunisia in order not to go to Vietnam. And this is just a small part of a bigger story, but it really, something in me snapped. We were told it's in the end of February, the beginning of March in 1968, that Hubert Humphrey was coming to Tunis. And and two things happened. First of all, my little circle of friends, Peace Corps friends, we wrote a petition against the war. And we circulated it. And I don't remember exactly, but the Peace Corps group was big in Tunisia. It was like 275, 300 people at the time. Teachers, architects, and preschool teachers for the most part. One brain surgeon. Almost everybody signed it. All right? So there was that going on. But I had a Tunisian Arabic tutor, a student, and she came, we had our session, and she said, there's going to be a demonstration against the war in Vietnam in downtown Tunis. And me and my buddy, still my buddy after 55 years or whatever it is, Phil Jones, we decided we're going to go down to the center of town. We want to see this Tunisian demonstration. So we get to the center of town, and the center of town in Tunisia, anyone who knows Tunisia, they know the center of town. It's where Avenue Bourguiba and Avenue de la Liberté, where they meet, and where the Café de Paris is, and there's nobody there. And I said, well, why'd she do that? Why'd she tell me that? And Phil, who has more patience than I do, says, let's wait 5 minutes. 5 minutes later, and it wasn't very soon thereafter, from all the side streets, okay? I don't know the number, but hundreds, if not more than 1,000 young people, mostly students, congregate in the center of town. And I'm thinking, well, American demonstration, oh, we'll hear speeches, and maybe they'll be in French, and maybe they'll be in Arabic, and maybe there'll be some music. No. One speech for 2 minutes, they threw leaflets around, and then almost immediately, bam, they're gone. 10 minutes later, the cops show up. And they are furious because there's nobody to beat up. All right? And I look at Phil, and Phil looks at me, and I'm telling this story for a reason. And he said, we should have been organizing this demonstration. These Tunisians, and in fact, I mentioned this to this student who, had been tutoring me. She said, no, this is not just for you. This is for all of us. This is solidarity. Okay, the end of that particular little story is, so the cops were frustrated. The next day, the police went up to the university, and they busted heads for 3 days. They arrested 500 people. Several hundred of them were sent to prisons in the Sahara, where they died. And it shook me. It wasn't like what I was used to in terms of a demonstration in the United States. These people risked their lives. Okay. I felt after that, I have to be doing this. Now, there's more to that story, but those were the two things. So the war, and having experienced the war in the Peace Corps in North Africa, here we are. We're supposedly there to help build bridges with people in foreign countries, and the Johnson administration's blowing up those bridges in Vietnam. So that was the way, as Peace Corps volunteers, that we thought about it. Now, there's a footnote to this story that I didn't know until 15 years later. Why was Humphrey in Tunis? I didn't know. Humphrey went to, this is just after what was called the Tet offensive, where the Vietnamese showed they hadn't been beaten, and not only that they were, quite a force to have to deal with. And apparently there was a discussion within the Johnson administration, what do we do now? How do we escalate? We already have 500,000 people here. And what was the discussion in the cabinet? We should use nuclear weapons. All right? And Humphrey's journey, Humphrey was sent to Europe and Africa and the Middle East. And Dean Rusk, who was the Secretary of State, was sent to Asia. And basically what both of them asked their American partners, wherever they went, was what would happen if, in your country, if the United States used nukes in Vietnam. And they were both told, if you do this, we will not be able to control our own populations. And by the way, your own Peace Corps volunteers. And it turns out it wasn't just in Tunisia. Peace Corps volunteers were demonstrating against the war in Vietnam all over Africa. All right? So Humphrey and Rusk go back to Johnson and says, you can't do it. You won't have, okay. Nukes. I didn't know that's what I was demonstrating about, to stop a nuclear war. And then we get to Colorado, and the first thing I'm hearing is they're going to use nukes to destroy the mountains. So those are the factors. Those are the really big things that, I know I'm talking too much, but that's what did it. It's like, no, I can't. No,
Yeah.
That was it. And by then I just, it was just, in the beginning, you feel like, once you get over the rage of all of the lies that were in your head about, how the country is, and then it's a question like anything else. So you're going to get off your butt and do something? and you do what you can for as long as you can and as effectively as you can, and then you realize you're not going to solve all these problems, but at least you will set up a kind of a tradition that others will follow. Okay, good.
Thank you, Rob. It's really beautiful. And Nancy, I wanted to kind of switch gears here, because this world can be really hard. I mean, just listening to the news is like devastating sometimes, right?
Yes.
What do you do to take care of yourself, to recharge, find spirituality, find hope? What do you do?
Well, I read a lot. I sometimes, what's the word, when you back off from those, he tends to just go jump in, and I just kind of back away and go read, or maybe take a hike in the weather, if the weather is good enough. I can kind of shut it off in my head, but I don't think that he can. Because all these terrible things, he just can't. Just like to shut them out.
I heard you talking about ice skating too.
Yeah, well, I don't do that a lot, but ice skating is a nice, mindless thing to do.
Not to put words in your mouth, but an avid hiker, music. I mean,
Yeah.
there are things that are part of your life that,
That make it more than
Yes,
just
that's
all the
right.
terrible news.
yeah.
And it has to be that, or else.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, how about you, Rob?
Because he embraces all the terrible news. I mean, not that it's good, but you just
Well, what do you
he
mean
gets
by
so
embrace it?
involved.
I mean,
You are always want to know more and read more, and if you can find somebody who you can connect with over that issue, then you do that. And see, I don't
all right.
get in the
Well,
middle
I
of
guess
stuff
that's how
so
it
much.
looks. So when I was in college, I wasn't a very serious student. But I did have an English teacher who had a great love for the poetry of William Blake. All right. I enjoy poetry. I feel like great understanding of a lot of it, but I really love Blake's poetry. And what Blake really looks at in his poetry is the contrast between what he refers to as the lion and the lamb. In the end, what we're really talking about is the beauty and the ugliness of life, and it's in both places. So why do I, 70 years later, still read about World War II? I can't do anything about what has happened other than learn about it honestly. All right? I understand that. And whether it was, what happened to the Jews or the Soviets or whomever, or the Chinese, I'm starting to learn now what happened in China really rivals what happened in what the Nazis did. But I just need to know it. Now, having said that, you're absolutely right. You have to find a way to somehow insulate yourself from all that horror, or you go nuts. In fact, I was just reading about, there was a Chinese-American woman who wrote about the rape of Nanking, when the Japanese went into Nanking, and in a week they killed, was it 100,000 or 200,000? I don't remember, but it was awful, and she committed suicide. She couldn't deal with the ugliness of it.
You mean she wrote the book?
She wrote the book, and then it was so horrible. Yeah, and that's the logical conclusion to what so whether you do that or whether you just, what happens to many people is they give a couple of years, and really if you think about it, it's the best years of their life, to other people, and that's all I call politics, all right? And it's too much, you can't sustain it. So you need something. In my case, I take pictures of birds. I like folk music. You know, you have a family. There's always that'll keep you real busy for a while. So yes, I agree. I agree with you. And in fact, at one point, I went to Lebanon and Syria. It was for the U.S. Peace Council, and it was in 1981. So it was just before the Israeli 1982 invasion of Lebanon, and already there had been, even before Sabra and Shatila, there had been massacres of Palestinians. And I went, I don't know, 5, 6 Palestinian camps in Lebanon that I went to. And everywhere I went, the next day the Israelis bombed. So I'm down in the south in a place called Rashidia Camp, where you could see Israel from, you know, it's really, and the next day, the headquarters where I sat was bombed. Then I left, and we're based in Beirut. Okay, so I fly out, and 2-3 days later, the Israelis drop a vacuum bomb. So what a vacuum, I didn't know what a vacuum bomb was, but rather than exploding outward after it, it causes this pressure that everything collapses, like vacuum sucked everything. 600 people were killed. Of course, what did the news say? They were all terrorists, you know. You know, I was playing with 2-3-year-old kids. They weren't, you know. And I cannot. I was so upset. Upset isn't the right word. I was furious, and my buddy, one of my buddies at the time, Michael Myerson, I mentioned this story. He says, "Rob, you can't do this." So you have to control your rage. And not only that, you have to find a way, okay, to have another part of your life so you can get through and you can continue to contribute. So this is a really good question. It's on our mind. I try to work on it. You know, do what I can. I don't know. Maybe that's enough for that. But yes, of course, it's
That's part
something.
of what I do is you do these things like bird watch and listen to folk music, but you spend very much time, you know, reading and
Oh yeah.
doing your meetings and your politicking. And so if we do something fun, I'm the one who plans it.
Oh
We
yeah,
go to a
absolutely.
concert, or we go to a museum.
Oh
or
yeah,
we-
she
these are
drags me to
small
these things.
things, and not very often, but we got to do those things. And then you're
Yes.
good. Once you get out there and do it, you
Oh, yeah,
actually like
good.
it too.
Good.
Yeah. But you
I
don't
didn't know
think
that.
of doing that kind of stuff. You're
Yeah.
too busy being involved in all the stuff that's going on.
Well-
I'm really more in the background. I mean, I do stuff, a lot of like Palestinian solidarity stuff. That's where a lot of my political energy is gone. But
Well, what about all the union work you did?
well,
I mean, you know.
there was union work too, but it's just different. We just have different approaches, and I'm not outgoing enough to get 100%, you know, involved in things. So we maybe complement each other, right? You know.
That'll be nice. You know, there's one other thing about all this. You know, people talk about, oh, well, you know, left politics is all about love. Well, of course, there's an element of it. I don't deny it. And particularly the people that you've worked with and you see how talented they are, how humane they are, how bold they are, the risks that they take. It's very, you know, there's that. And so, yeah, of course, there's people and you love them and you always will. But there's something else that moves politics. It's rage. All right? Rage and injustice. All right? And that is a driving force in me. So I sometimes can't listen to how much we love each other because what I'm feeling is something quite different. Now, having said that, another friend of mine who tells me that she didn't say it, but I clearly remember that she did, once said to me that, well, Rob, all politics is controlled rage. But that's my take on politics. Good politics, yeah, without the rage is kind of the engine that gets you going, the fuel. But if it's not focused, and if it's not focused, and part of a population of people, a community, it's like a balloon, you know. There's no going off in a room. So that's a factor there too. And you would think after all these years, you know, that that would be tempered some, but just the opposite. So, you know, so on the one hand, you know, it's kind of a problem. You wake up angry. What bullshit are they up to today? What horrible thing? You know, what were you talking about this morning? I mean, we're not sure about this, but this football player dies on the field. We're starting to hear about people
Had a cardiac arrest.
had cardiac. Yeah, I'm not sure if he's dead yet. Right.
Yeah.
We're starting to hear people get all their vaccinations for COVID and they're dropping dead. Now, is this a case of that? I don't know, but this is a very suspicious thing to me that a healthy football player just drops dead of a heart attack. So you know, that was this morning. But every morning there's something, whatever it is. So you know, so you got to control that rage.
He's good at coming up with an approach. Like I could never, if there's some kind of political or social problem, I don't know how to effectively address it, but you come up with lots of ideas, and then the rest of us, not all the rest of us, but some of the rest of us can then work on carrying out the ideas. But you're a real idea person, and you're always, it just comes. It doesn't seem like you have to struggle to figure it out. It just, you think of ways to try to, you know, address these different situations.
So, just to kind of wrap this up, I want to use a word here that describes, as I'm sitting here, describes you two and your relationship, and it's grace. You guys, I can't define grace, but I know when I see it.
Grace?
Grace, yes.
That's nice.
And it's not just a compliment. I'm just not throwing out a compliment. I would like to ask you guys one word to describe each other or your relationship.
Oh, golly. I would have to explain it, but I would say talkative.
I was going to say ornery.
Because I come from a family that didn't talk. They were Midwesterners.
Yeah. They don't learn to talk in the Midwest.
And you don't talk about
They just learn to go around repressed.
or what bothers you or anything. And so I met this person from New York, and he was talking about everything all the time. It was so exciting.
Yeah.
So if I have to have one word.
Maybe open too. Open, right?
Yeah. Open to talking about anything.
Well, I don't know how to describe you in one word.
I don't think ornery is maybe.
One.
But
Well, ornery is part of it.
I guess that's up to you.
But yeah, you right. I'm just real lucky to have spent all these years with you. I don't know how to put it in words.
It is amazing, you know, you don't really have a plan, and
No, oh, never.
you don't know if it's going to work, but somehow, in spite of the difficulties and fights and struggles and low points, it's still hung together.
Yeah, and you gotta work
But
on it all the time.
nobody knows. It is partly luck. It's partly luck.
Yes, of course. Unquestionably, I mean, you know. if you think about it, if you told somebody how we got here, they would just look at you and say, well, why don't you tell us the truth now?
Well, I want to really thank you guys.
All right, you're welcome.
And I personally, you know, have learned through life that it's really important to tell people that you love them and you care about them, because you just never know.
That's right, you never do.
So I love you guys, and I appreciate you very much.
Well, isn't that
Arnie,
sweet?
I think that well, I should speak for myself. Everybody loves you. Maybe not everybody, but you're just a lovable guy too. You sure are. Look how you came and
Yeah.
sat here with us.
Thank you guys.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay. I'm gonna go to the bathroom again.
Hi.
Well, I had that seltzer water. It
Oh,
just,
is that what happened?